if you want to use this application to force open your layout application or your detailing application, whatever it is you're using it in, Revit or AutoCAD, you don't have to go and open it. You can actually click this here. It'll force open your application. Okay. And before I go too far here, let's go here. Biggest part of this is making sure we have all of our general settings set right. Okay. And it just kind of triggered when I was talking about the points of CAD. It wouldn't make sense what that all means until we see which one it's actually going to open up. Okay. Generals, pretty generic. Company, obviously you can put all your information here. Obviously for reporting and such, you can put all that information in here. Units, obviously a big one. We want to know what our coordinate orders are. That's obviously a big thing, whether you're going to do X and Y or Y, X. Our distance, I want to say by default, and I don't know if you guys are able to follow along or not. James and Jeremy, do you both have it installed so you're able to kind of follow along?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Okay, perfect. Because I'd say probably some of these things that we do point out, you may want to go ahead and change, make sure it's consistent across the board.
Especially distance settings there, you might want to make sure it didn't default to you guys being open in US feet. You want to make sure you're on international feet.
Yeah. Format, this is going to be decimal places, like he was saying. We are getting in kind of those display type settings that you don't want text too big, too small. You also don't want decimal places too large, right? Where you have 6, 7 decimal places, doesn't make a lot of sense. We want to try to condense that down, make it a little bit tighter of a tolerance. But this is where you can adjust that. I'm going to leave mine as default for now, which is 3 decimal places. Display, again, here we go. This is our point sizes, what we want to do, making our adjustments. And William, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe these display settings, this is generic to in here, and then once we get into the applications, we will have our individual display settings in there as well. But this is just one area where you can actually control that.
Yeah, I think this is controlling when we put stuff over, like if we were to import or send anything over. But most of this is when it's viewed in here. You'll see it later when we bring a point in here. There's a graphical view of the points in those lists that you can see. If that makes sense.
This is what they call live folder. Obviously, while the application's running, I believe everything is being stored in there. To be honest with you, there's no need to really adjust this information here unless you just really, really want to. This is a big one here because you may have more than one flavor of AutoCAD or Revit installed, which this is for CAD itself. For me, I'm running 2022 actively. Do I have other versions? Yes, I do have multiple versions for support technical reasons. And so I try to find one. What you need to do is make sure that you do navigate to that executable. So if you do have 21, 22, 23, 24, let's say, and you want to use 22 because that's what all the Revit models are on, you're trying to stay consistent, make sure that you navigate to that EXE and select that EXE. So that way when you do hit this here and you force it open through the application, it actually opens up the proper executable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I think by default, it's whenever you install it, it will navigate or it'll point to the most current version of whatever AutoCAD you have. So make sure that you do. If it is a one below that, I'd make sure you go and navigate to that. Okay. Obviously, some inside of CAD, some of these information, it's just some customizable features. You have some blocks. We have some different block types. We'll leave all that standard for now. We're not going to get too much into that right now, too much in the weeds, but this is where if you do want to change it, you can go and select. We have a few different versions of what the point looks like, the point block looks like. So obviously you guys can look into that a little bit further. The background file, when you export it, you can select here whether you want it to be DWG, and I believe it's probably DXF. Yep. Advanced, and I think most of this stuff stays pretty default, but this just want to show you that if you do have some display things you want to adjust, this is where you can do it within the point manager itself. And again, I think that, well, again, this is the area that if you bringing point files into the point manager application, standalone application, and or if you're taking information from here into AutoCAD, this is the information it's going to carry with it, if that makes sense. Okay.
Theoretically, we make no promises because it changes.
And then obviously your BIM program, same thing, right? Make sure that you're navigating to the right flavor of Revit that you're using, which most jobs are going to be proprietary to a particular version of Revit, right? So if it was designed and it may be in 2022 still, there are some that are obviously up in 23, 24 at this point, but whatever the job's calling for, make sure that you're using that way you're not, kind of scrambling back and forth, try to get it correct. So make sure that you do point it to the right executable. And then again, you have kind of the same display settings that you can adjust here, right? Families, we have different family types that you can use, visual styles if you want to call it that. Same thing, background file, whenever we do export out our points and it creates the background file, same thing, right? CAD export option, oh good.
One little caveat with this is when you want to start placing points in AutoCAD or Revit, 90% of the time in AutoCAD, you want to do points in CAD and let it open the application. A lot of the time you can get away with having the application first and then go, oh man, I'm already in my drawing, I'm already doing this, I want to start Point Manager. You can start Point Manager, and 90% of the time it will connect and work. That does not happen with Revit. So if you plan on doing any types of point stuff in Revit, you have to start Revit through this to get it to connect.
Okay. So it likes being open through the Point Manager app.
Right, that's how it makes that connection. Those two softwares should be talking to each other.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so also if you open up Revit and then you go back and open up Point Manager, it won't necessarily open up your Point Manager ribbon inside of Revit.
Okay.
So then you'd have to close everything down. So if you went through any sort of updating or anything like that and it took forever to open up Revit, you'd have to close it all back down and force open it through Point Manager. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So. Okay, so these are just kind of your basic settings. We obviously, the biggest ones, we want to make sure that we're is making sure that we're on the right units. That's a big one for here, and our executables. Okay. I'm just gonna hit OK.